Welcome to the AWP University, a construction industry institute, registered education provider.
Okay, hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to the AWP University webinar series. We're very proud today to deliver, I think, one of our most interesting webinars thus far, which is the AWP and Lean presentations, if you will, and how AWP and Lean have been working together over the last little while in a joint working group with CII to present a best of breed next generation delivery for projects. Fernando Espana from ConstructX and John Strickland are going to be our presenters today, taking us through this great topic that I'm sure you're all very interested in hearing about. So let's move forward, and if the slide will advance. There we go. Let me introduce myself. My name is Robin Mickelson. I'm the president of the AWP University. AWP University is just that. We are an online as well as instructor-led in-person training organization for the purposes of furthering AWP adoption in the industry. This is a webinar series that we've been doing now for about 6 months. And we've had a lot of esteemed guests. This will be our last webinar for the summer. We will pick it up again in the fall. AWP University has an extremely busy summer booked, and we will pick up the webinar series again in the fall to go through the winter till about this time again next year. So many of you have listened through all of the previous webinars, and I thank you for that. And this one, I'm sure, will not disappoint. Okay, so let's move forward. We are going to use Slido, as we have for all the webinars in this series. To log into Slido, we are going to use it for some basic Q&A. We're also going to use Slido for getting some questions to start with and logging those questions at the end for our presenters today to answer. So scan that QR code with your phone, or go to slido.com and put in this code AWPU5 to get access on your desktop or your laptop to be able to send questions and answer questions. All right, so in order to get you primed up, I've got a couple questions that I want to ask you before you ask us questions. So let's look at those. First question, please rate your familiarity with advanced work packaging. So feel free to log in. You can scan that QR code here, go through and answer those questions. All right, there we go. We're getting some. A lot of new to AWP, some intermediate, and a couple experts. It's good to hear. All right, so we will, all right. Looks like we've got a few more experts and a lot of new to AWP. All right, excellent. Thank you for answering that for us. We have another question, very similar question. Please rate your familiarity with lean construction and integrated project delivery. Being this is AWP and lean, we're trying to get a point from both sides. So we've got some experts in lean, that's great. We've also got some intermediates and some that are new to lean or IPD. So that's great. We're going to discuss what all that means in these presentations, and well, it looks like we're leveling out the cross section, so we've got a pretty even cross section of personnel. It's great to see. All right, and one final question before we get rolling. All right, so please rate your familiarity with operations science and project production management, or PPM. Okay, unfamiliar, new to it, intermediate, no experts in this one, it doesn't seem thus far, other than our panelists, of course. But we've got a fair bit new and intermediate, so that's great. Okay, so thank you very much for helping us with our basic polls. Let me introduce our speakers today. I'm very proud to introduce two people, Mr. Fernando Espana, first off, the ConstructX president, longtime personal friend of mine, as well as colleague, Fernando is a AWP guru as well as a lean practitioner for many, many years. He will give you a much more thorough introduction of himself. He is a great resource from both sides. And Mr. John Strickland, who is also in that same category of expert in both areas. Very knowledgeable gentleman, very happy to have both of these guys here to help us out and present today. If you wish to connect with them or want to ask questions beyond our presentation here today, or just look them up on LinkedIn, please feel free to scan the QR codes on the screen right now. That will take you directly to their LinkedIn pages and allow you to connect with both of our speakers today. So with that, I am going to get out of the way. I am going to get to the good stuff, and I am going to turn it over to Fernando and John, who are going to take us forward through the next half an hour or so to give us the presentation here. So there's Fernando. Thank you for joining us, Fernando.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to change presenter now. Fernando or John? To John?
To John, yeah.
Okay, John's got the ball now.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay.
So, thank you, Robin, for that introduction. Yes, I've had a varied experience in AWP, Lean, and some project production management through my years, and it really stemmed from the fact that I do come out of the contracting business. Working in the engineering circles, design circles, owner representatives, and a lot of it in construction. And of course, I felt the pains of those delivery processes. And early back in my career, I did get introduced to the early lean construction founders, and was able to get quite involved and went out and did some really interesting things with technologies that were emerging, lean construction, and then in 2005 got involved with advanced work packaging, and my exposure to all these things kind of made me look at this blend we're going to talk about, this next generation of why aren't we building things together. And in that process, I mean, I met John Strickland early in late 90s, that he was also a lean leader doing some really exciting things. So there's no wonder that why we are both presenting together, because we're trying to bring things to industry and be the guides to ADP plus Lean plus DFMA, which we're going to chat about earlier. So John, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Sure. John Strickland. First off, has everyone seen the title slide to a presentation on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely a construction background, and I was working on some very large high-tech projects where speed was everything. And somewhere along that, early in my career, I had figured out that creating flow on projects is really important. So when the Lean Construction Institute formed in 1997, I was tapped on the shoulder right away and was actually involved in that. And I've been working on that for some time. And Fernando actually was helping me out on a very large and very successful project. So we got to know each other pretty well. We introduced some of the concepts we're going to talk about today. And the project turned out great. And then a few years later, I was at probably 5 years ago, I was at, I believe, a CURT conference in Phoenix, and I ran into Fernando again, and he's working on AWP. I said, that's strange, because AWP and Lean had not always seen things eye to eye. And we started talking, and that conversation has led us to where we are today. Forming this joint working group, saying, we can do a lot better together than we can apart. So that's who we are. Again, a lot of construction on my side, and engineering companies as well. You can see our logos there, and I'll make the first advance here, and we'll a little bit of a safety moment. And this is one we can all relate to, and it relates to this presentation. You can kind of read it there. For every 10 miles an hour of increased speed, your risk of being seriously injured in a crash doubles. That's not only because you're more likely to get in a crash, it'll be more severe when you do. As a cyclist, I'm very keenly aware of vehicles driving really fast past me, and especially if they're distracted. And it kind of relates back to this, because an awfully lot of our hurrying on the highway is futile. And I see lots of futile hurry. on projects that doesn't do much to get the project done faster, and it introduces a lot of risk. And so part of knowing how to take risk out of project is knowing how to get everyone working together and going at the same speed. So that's how our safety moment kind of ties into what we're doing to relate to us. Another click.
All right. So one thing that we want to talk about here today is, what is this next generation? What are we talking about, this AWP plus Lean? And there's a lot of methodologies that have been introduced, and I'm seeing that there's a varied levels of experience. So what we've seen with advanced work packaging, for instance, that's coming out, you know, there's seems to be a lot of robust make-ready activities, right? It's all about getting our packaging ready to hand down to downstream customers all the way through to startup. You know, there's a lot of stakeholder alignment, a lot of integrated material management, constraint management, right? So we see a lot of emerging trends is that we want to improve on that. You know, we want to drive culture for adoption, and we also want to do a lot more data integration, because that's how we're going to solve some of the more tougher questions we'll talk about a little bit later. And we also have the lean side of it, which lean construction, and of course there is the key component of that is probably some of you have heard is the last planner system. You know, weekly task reliability, and how do we get teams to be more collaborative, more communicative, more agile. Right, so there's this constant commitment-based delivery, integrated project delivery, you know, respect for people component. And then a design for manufacturing, of course, is another that, you know, we need to make our assemblies much more efficient in the field. So how do we get our manufacturers to contribute to a more efficient field assembly later on? So there's a lot of that communication with our supply chain, integration with our construction teams that have to happen. And two other things that have grown out of our AWP plus Lean committee, because this is kind of why we have it, is operations science and flow control and scalability, and you know, we need technology to come into it. So there's all these things out there, and you know, we said, hey, look, everybody is working in their own bubble. Why aren't we taking the best out of all these and looking at how we can blend them together to attack a specific project condition, or to better an organization's effectiveness? So yeah, why don't we go to the next slide? So we started up this AWP plus Lean, and you know, John and myself are the co-chairs of that, and we've been able to get a lot of representatives and buy-in from these different organizations. You can see the Construction Industry Institute, which is the base of which we operate out of, that allowed us to set up this AWP plus Lean joint working group and invite members outside of CII, which brought us into with the Lean Construction Institute, and members that are representative of them, and also the Project Production Institute that is PPI, which brings in the operations science. So we have members, and you can see all the organizations, owner organizations, EPC organizations, you know, universities and technology companies, and you know, and different types of partners or consultants that really are contributing to the betterment of the process. So we have a lot of representatives in very different companies that actually contribute to what we're doing here at AWP plus Lean. So John, I don't know if you want to think more about.
We're getting all this input, and no one's arguing with us. I mean, there's been the surprising thing is how much concurrence. And I think I want to say here is a lot of times you leave webinars and you're going to hear, boy, the industry's all fouled up, things are bad, you know, that we should be ashamed of ourselves. No. A lot of what we do is absolutely amazing. I just snapped some shots here. That doesn't mean that we don't have to do better. But this isn't about us working in a failed industry. We work in an incredibly complex industry. And so I think we should be awfully proud of what we do accomplish. But there's room for improvement. And this is some slides that came out of CII. I think it was the Industrial Integrated Project Delivery team worked on this. Some folks, some friends at PTAG and other folks to put this together. But they did some research and came out, hey, 65% of projects, particularly mega projects, are failing to meet their objectives when failure was 20% over cost. If you were less than 20%, you had a successful project, which seems like kind of a big deal. And the thing that I really got out of this is why the projects are failing. If you see my cursor moving around, the dominant thing about why the projects were failing was how we were organized and how we were working together. The project factors weren't inconsequential, but they were very small compared to how we are interacting with one another. So if this is where the big, if this is the source of all of our dysfunction, well, let's go attack those things. And I think we're right on top of that. And Fernando, Jim came up with some very similar things.
Right. Yeah. So Jim Ellis, who was also, worked with Savic and worked with before that with DuPont and had big roles in both of those, and then of course went on to lead Microsoft. And very, very. I respect him very well. If you have a chance to listen to Jim, you should take it. But he also identified in some of his keynotes here in last October, kind of related the fact that his experience and is kind of parallel with what the industry is saying. 98% of mega projects have these cost overruns. They fail to meet one or more of their business objectives. And when you look at business objectives, do we even talk about business objectives as much as we should, right? 70% not completed within 10% of the budget, cost, or schedule. It's huge. And the one that I also see, that's not being efficient. But when we think of lean and lean thinking, and the 40% of the project capital is wasted on transactions, and our industry is so transactional, we don't realize that the broader holistic value that we can bring to drive improvements that really adds to the value of our different project teams, to our clients, and everything else. But what also is happening is safety is starting to erode, right? That's not big focus on safety over the past 2 decades, has really improved. But wait, what's happening? We're not really improving it like we should be. And then really not sustainable. Capital projects fail to drive sustainability, and all that combined erodes shareholder value, which is kind of key. And I know that I'm going to let John talk about that last statement.
Yeah, this is great because data is important. I was just noticing that the transaction here, that we're going to get those low bids no matter how much it costs us. Is a little bit of the challenge we have. And then I don't think we recognize how much our transactions cost us, but understanding what's really going on. And so lean is all about making sure everybody really understands what's really going on, about what's really important. And that kind of reflects what Ono said, that he places the emphasis on facts and what's going on. And this is a pretty dramatic image here. You want to cover that in for us, Fernando?
Yeah. So and you see that little image there holding the globe. There's a big push on sustainability and getting to a net zero, and the projects required to do that are going to almost double the global requirement, up to $9 trillion a year, basically. And we are in no position right now to manage that, given the demand of that, the complexity of that, and the dynamics of all that in a market that we have today, right? It's just, we hear that every day. And it's the type of quality of resources, the performance requirements are changing. We can't rely on what we did last 5 years to carry us, to sustain us in the next 5 years. So the demand for cost to go down is happening. The demand for time and delivery is mattering more and more. Our quality requirements and outputs and are also wanting to go up higher and higher. And of course, the focus on safety is always going to be present. And if our strategy is to work harder, work faster, and just demand more of our resources, we're going to fail on all these counts. So the fact is, we can't meet the demands right now, let alone what's coming, is kind of the big message.
Yeah, and that wave's getting bigger, and because we can't just swim harder. And so it seems kind of obvious it'd be a lot more fun to ride the wave than to get squashed by it. And I love the surfboard image. People like to talk about tools, and that surfboard is a very important tool. But if you don't know how to use it, if you don't have the basic understanding of how it works, you're going to have a very poor experience in that wave. So let's figure out how to ride the wave instead of fight it, and we'll do a lot better.
Exactly. So yes, the world is changing, and all these practices that are great practices, but the practice today is good, but not good enough. I think everybody, at least on the CII side, and those that involved with AWP, are always constantly doing research as how do we get broader adoption? How do we make it better? How do we improve the process, right? Because the message, I think, has been received by many that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, right, we have to operate differently. And things are just changing all the time. And like I said before, the demand on our resources and our organizations, are changing. So we're in the middle of a lot of adoption challenges. So what that means, and we can jump down to the next slide that we just saw previously, is that we have to look at different solution sets where we can't be satisfied with, gee, if I just do better with what I'm doing currently, that's going to somehow solve the problem, right? Or hey, if I'm on the lean side, I just got to do a better job at pull planning. And how do I leverage technology? How do I leverage data sets? And how do I look at the science of all this and leverage ourselves, or leverage our resources or new resources that have to come in to help us understand the complexities and understand the opportunities, because the easiest thing we can do as humans, right, is just kind of do the same old thing that we've always done, right? Why do I need to bring in something new? It's hard work, but you know what? It's going to be harder work once our projects, are challenged. We're not meeting our goals, our business objectives, and we're throwing more money, we're throwing more resources, and we're having more difficulty in our supply chain, right? Because we're not looking at how do we integrate, synchronize, and manage through a better process, which is this whole next generation concept.
Yeah, otherwise we risk something I see fairly often sitting in the last planner meetings or working with people is they will do a very nice job of pull planning and restraint removal and making very reliable promises on work that shouldn't be done now.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's where kind of operations science is there, and is to put all this together. And then there is a science behind it, isn't there, Fernando?
Yeah. So the idea is that if we pay attention to how all these different factors affect whether you're a lean practitioner or an ADP practitioner or a PPI practitioner, right, or an expert DFMA, right? There's always these factors that have to be considered, right? It's the people side, the process side. What process am I following? How are my processes failing us because we're dogmatic about always using one methodology or the other, right? And what technologies, and this is one that's vastly changing and accelerating. And so how are we going to leverage this new world of data that we can have in front of us, right? So how do we blend that in so we can deliver better? So, and all this leads to the culture, right? Because nothing gets done effectively unless we have a culture that wants to support it, people that want to support it. And this is probably the more difficult challenge, but we have to do that. We have to be mindful of that fact, and organizational change, expertise or process or strategies have to now come into play because everything's changing a lot on the process and technology side, right? So if you click down, we can see what happens is when we have people, right? Want to go back one? Yeah. So if we get the people factors right, we drive up reliability. Very lean concept. If we look at do the process right, we get repeatability. Very, very PPI and ADP centric processes. Scalability is what technology will deliver to us, right? We have to rely on technology, but just like John said, it's a tool. If we don't have the right information, or we can't interpret that information, or it's not delivering anything, we're going to crash into that wave. So yes, technology is going to help us scale things so we can be much more efficient across many more projects. And then finally, if we can get that right and we can get the culture right, we get sustainability. We can improve year after year after year, and not do what typically on our projects and what John and I have experienced is that we finish a project, all the great things that get done and all the good people that have been there just get distributed to other projects, and then they end up having to start the same old way, the same, every time, because there's no alignment on good programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that continuity is a big thing. So what we're trying to do, this kind of leads us into developing a better understanding. And so this group is trying to draw from these organizations and others. And what we want is better understanding. And my idea is we're developing better project leaders. And the project leaders won't relate to any particular camp. They will be better project leaders that understand all of these disciplines and what they're trying to go do. And if we have better project leaders who understand what is really going on and why the projects aren't really getting done as fast as we want to, we'll make better decisions and get better projects. So this is, we're going to talk about this quite a bit of having a better understanding of what the underlying factors are and where we can go. And so there's several, we're not going to read all this, but you can scan it, and if you look at the presentation later, but CII brings a lot. They bring a lot of formal stuff. LCI particularly brings a very solid part of the human factors, the collaboration, and a collaborative type of a contract, focus on learning and the importance of flow. And I would say that PPI brings a very good thing about the physics of flow and the science behind it. And how it runs as a production system. And I'm sure we're going to be talking to other people about artificial intelligence, automation, industrialization. Actually, I believe PPI is actually working on all those things as we go forward. But we need to be working together. For a while, there were some rather, I would say, unflattering comments that one camp would make about the other's work. And there's so much more we have in common than we have apart that we need to be pulling together to respond to these industry changes. You want anything to that, Fernando?
Yeah, that's good. These are good points that you're making here. And what the joint working group is just discovering, I want to say, along the way, is we're learning about the other processes. It's that gaining that level of understanding that John mentioned, and understanding that there are applications, right? Not only applications that we can apply to our methodology, right? Whether CII can now take advantage of some of the cost plan or pull planning to help create reliability in our engineering deliverables or our field deliverables, right? But LCI can also take advantage of the structure of AWP to drive up their ability to do better constraint management, right? So everybody's discovering these things and learning. And again, no one's arguing. They're all saying this is a great idea. We're starting to expose the industry into what can be a better practice that we need to pull from others. So in PPI, I think Everett's opening up their eyes about just the study of how we buffer work, right, and create problems. And the last part is going to be a huge opportunity if we can sort out how artificial intelligence and automation and the concept of an industrialized process, comes into play the right way. Right, because it could be wrong, right? And we can just accelerate wrong things quickly. Right?
Exactly. That one of the first things when you do process optimization, one of the first things you kind of learn and figure out is don't automate a lousy process. Get your process figured out, understand your process, and then apply the automation to it. Life will go better. There's a pretty important concept. So I want you to think about just the best project you ever worked on. What was a really great project? Just kind of visualize that project. Take a second or two and come across some words that when you describe it to someone. And I'm going to guess that the words like smooth and flow were part of it. And I was going to guess the owner was happy and there was a high degree of satisfaction, and probably people were happy. When projects flow well, good things happen. Conversely, how about a lousy project?
Yeah. So what do you think about a lousy project? I mean, was that smooth project just happenstance, good process, or what have you? But what happens when things didn't go quite as well? Did you see things flow smoothly, or was everything a struggle? was there a lot of people waiting? Hurry up and wait, is the worst part. Yeah, fill that space over there, do things, and then stop, and I'll find another place for you to go. Some resources are overloaded while others are starved for work. There's probably some ideas here. Hey, you missed commitments. I mean, we don't hit our dates. We don't hit our deliverables that don't make it quite as finished as they should be. The handoffs are not right. I gave you half of what you asked for. Right, and out of sequence work, which is huge, and if you're measuring out of sequence work, that could be upwards of 20 to 30%. It's what I found is people that don't show up on the plan, all of a sudden things are getting done that shouldn't be getting done. And the worst one is after the glad handing in the beginning and shake, the blame game starts. Why am I behind on this? And where's that? And how are you going to make it up? And who's going to pay for this overrun, right? Those are the blame games. So
and the blame doesn't usually address the root cause.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
So you're not really learning. So that blame game. I'm just curious how many people have been on projects that were the last 5% took way more than 5% of the money and time available. That happens all the time. So a few things we would start focusing on, And so that last slide, clearly we have a focus on understanding what flow means. And that's a huge reason why we reached out to PPI to help us understand that, help us bend our understanding. But one thing I've learned is this: lean is not really about reducing waste in my mind. It's about creating flow. If you create flow, you will automatically reduce waste. But you can reduce waste all over the place. And if you're not applying it to the right place, you won't go any faster. So that explains a lot of things, and that's real closely related to, productivity is important, but it's not as important as throughput. And so often many of the things we do to pursue productivity impede throughput, and many of the things we do in traditional project management do far more to inhibit flow than it does to facilitate it, because we don't seem to understand it. And speaking of understanding, we really need to respect human nature. And so the lean phrase for that is respect for people. And it's not just the altruistic being nice to people and being good people. That's great. It's really more about understanding how people work, understanding human nature and what people will do, and aligning the work so they will do it more naturally. And Hal Maycomer helped me understand that better just recently, that respect for people means more than just being nice to them. And
The idea there is, of course, that everybody has something to contribute. They have knowledge that they can contribute, but a command and control structure will say, what, your job is to go over there and just do what I tell you to do, right? I'm the general foreman, you're the foreman, I'm the construction manager, you're the superintendent, and here's what you got to go do. And then that just right. And so how do we take advantage of people's knowledge and listen and ask questions rather than make statements and things like that? So
I've often said that construction is at its heart, when I came into the business, was a coercion-based business. We're going to force people, we're going to write contracts and force people to do things. Well, the thing I figured out is every effort to coerce and control people is met with an equal and opposite effort to avert the control. So that is part of that transactional cost, that transactional waste. So we'll need to find some way to decrease the disruption as people and work and information flows across organizational boundaries. So that's a huge part of what we have to go do. And I think that will also help us focus on advanced work packaging. I think the next advance in advanced work packaging is aligning how we package it to value and flow. And there are some specific techniques. We can't go into the details today about doing that, but there's some specific about how we might reconfigure construction work packages to be more multidisciplinary and be the units of flow the owner needs. And then something that's become really apparent to me over the last bit is reducing this big waste of pre-construction cost validation. So just visualize for a second that you've spent an enormous amount of time on front-end engineering, preparing very comprehensive bid documents, exercising the hell out of the bidding community to go get the prices. The prices come in, it's too high, and nothing disrupts the flow of a project like not being able to start. And that is a huge amount of waste, and it's completely unnecessary. that there's a we can make some major strides on that one. So those are some of the first things the guys like Fernando and I are talking about, and really these are some of the things really no one's arguing about. We need to figure out how to go do it, and we've started publishing some things.
Yeah. So in the TII website, those of you that are members can easily get this, and they've been openly shared across the joint working group members. That we are publishing documents to help our industry understand what it means to be to AWP or Lean organization, and why there's some advantages to understanding each other's methodologies and blending them. The other big one, which came out first, and you can see, is organizational culture, right? And that was that slide before, that if we don't get the culture right and start focusing on the development of these cultures, right, we're not going to get the gains that we expect out of our AWP, Lean, and DFMA and PPI type environments, right? And so we also developed that like a infomercial in a way to compare all the approaches, especially around AWP and Lean. What does AWP say about a certain topic, and what does Lean say about it, and where's the opportunity to blend those two together? So there is another 3 documents here that have been published, and John and I are working on the 4th one, which is about flow, which he'll talk a little bit about here next.
Yeah, oops, click on here one more time. So the next one here is about, what is flow, and to really understand flow, why is it important? And my simple reason is flow is money. That's when you get something you can use. It's a common denominator, lots of things, capacity. It also makes life better for the people on the projects. Projects are much more pleasant to work on, much more rewarding if things are flowing smoothly. And I said for some time that frustration is to waste as smoke is to fire. So when people are very frustrated in their work, there's something wrong in your production process, and that will go tell you how, some of the places you need to go look. So we'll be having this paper coming out shortly. It's in the final review. These are some of the things that we'll be talking about, is comparing how we think about different aspects.
Right. Yeah. So, again, when you think about these key processes, it's not saying AWP or Lean or DFMA. It's understanding the basic principles behind good project delivery, right? So how do we think about flow? So our project activities are running smoothly. Everybody understands handoffs. We understand at what point do we stop work and hand it off to somebody else so they can be efficient, and we're not doing a lot of work and going back to do rework. So what is that work in process? Do we have stacks and stacks of things, or are we working on the right things at the right time? Pull-based delivery, uncertainty, variation, and change, batch sizing are all key type of components. Utilization versus throughput. It goes into what John was saying about that versus productivity. They're absolutely, we want productivity improvements to be a great outcome, right? We want resource utilization to be a great outcome. We always want these, but it's the managing of this flow and allowing people to be productive in how they attack things, right? It gives us those outputs. The classic example is, hey, me as the fire sprinkler guy, or me as the HVAC guy, or me as the wall guy, we all have these thoughts about how we're going to be highly productive on this great job. Yet, okay, the first guy in, he did his job, fire sprinklers are up and they really efficient, but man, now they're interfering with all the ducts, all the walls, everything else. And so now we have to rethink our plan, rather than what items should go up in productivity and what items maybe should go down, right?
Yeah.
Because we're trying to look at the total throughput, and there's trade-offs to make, and people need to be compensated for those trade-offs, right? But that's the thinking we need to get to. So it goes into decision timings, the buffers, responsibility for planning and coordination. Who's really doing that? What level is doing that? Respect for the participants, supply chain management, and team structures. How do we get high performance teams to shape, and how many should be on a project, not just one, right? So so John, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, but.
So here's kind of the bottom line. I think we're approaching the question and answer phase, but what we're doing now is we're creating awareness, and we're finding a lot of interest. So now let's go try it. Let's go start putting these things in practice, developing trials and solutions, drawing upon the wisdom we have. Let's go deliver projects. As we deliver more projects, we'll become aware of more things we can improve upon. So that's the basic mission we're on. I think that there's a lot of exciting opportunity to go do this. And I think at this point, I can hand it back over to Robin. We'll see what kind of questions might be coming up.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for that. Very informative. We've had quite a few questions that have been coming in. I ask all of our participants to please continue to add questions to the docket, as well as you can go into the system and vote on those questions to move them up and down in the list to help us set priority for answering. Most of these webinars, we can't get through all of the questions, so your votes on the questions really help us to drive those forward. Now, if you hand me the share, I'll continue with a few different things,
Okay.
John.
Yeah. Sharing. Change presenter.
All right.
I'm moving it there to Robin. Robin, you should have control.
I do. Thank you very much. So just verifying we've got the right screen, and we do. All right. This is excellent. Okay, so I want to cover a few little housekeeping items before we jump right into the Q&A. I've noticed we've got quite a few questions coming in, so I want to make sure we clear the way before we jump into the questions directly. So on the screen, as you can see, is 2 QR codes. This is how you can find each of our presenters' prospective organizations here today for John Strickland and Collaborative Flow. Please feel free to scan that QR code. That'll take you to their LinkedIn so that you can continue to answer some questions. And for Fernando Espana with ConstructX, please feel free to scan that code. That will take you actually to the corporate ConstructX site, I believe. And Fernando's personal LinkedIn was on the previous one, if you will. So with that, we'll go through a few other things here. Few events that I wanted to make sure the community is aware of. From both the LEAN and the AWP perspectives, if you will. CII annual conference coming July 31st, August 3rd. That's kind of Christmas for CII personnel, if you will. That's the big one. That's the big gathering for all of us in CII every year. It's in San Antonio this year. Great facility by the looks of it. Hope to see you there. I will be there. AWP University will be there. I believe Fernando will be there as well. John, will you be in attendance for the CII annual conference?
Probably.
Right.
I haven't blocked that one in.
I hope we'll see you there. I hope so. All right. Then the LCI Congress, October 24th to 27th in Detroit. And then the AWP Conference, October 10th and 11th in Houston, Texas. I've got some further information about the AWP Conference coming on the next slide, because we've got a big promotion that we are running with the AWP Conference directly from the AWP University. That I think only benefits the industry. So I want to talk about it for a minute. And then as we go through here, there's many webinars that are coming. All of these webinars, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, are listed on the CII website as well from the webinar listing. I've seen several of them there. Where else can people find how to register for these webinars, gentlemen?
Yeah, so CII will actually publish announcements to the different communities. And they have graciously opened up to beyond the CII members. So I would basically tie into the CII LinkedIn page and other community pages. I'll be forwarding them as well. But anybody can join. And if you want to make sure that you're on that list, or specifically, you can either reach out to me or John, and we can make sure that you are included in that list. Or if you want to even join our committee, joint working group, please reach out.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Fernando. Okay, so with that, please find those webinars, because they're all extremely informative. I've enjoyed them. It's one of the reasons why I had to have these two gentlemen on our own series. As I mentioned, for the AWP conference coming in October in Houston, big announcement that we've made previously on LinkedIn and other is our AWP University scholarships that we're delivering in conjunction with Group ASI, the presenters of the AWP conference. There's 3 main awards: the John Fish Scholarship Award, the Jay Mosier Scholarship Award. Both of those are directed specifically for future leaders in construction, people under 30, people that are getting started. The award comes with a full ride scholarship from AWP University, approximately 50 hours of training, as well as mentorship from the sponsorship individuals that are mentioned here. Then there's the Jan Shoemate Award. The Jan Shoemate Award is directly directed towards helping to encourage more women into construction. It is a scholarship award that's directly directed to those that identify as women in our industry. And it also carries very prestigious mentoring from Jan Shoemate. In order to apply for those scholarships, which will be presented at that conference that I mentioned, please either go to our LinkedIn page or look at any of our social media. We've been promoting it very heavily. It's very easy to find those links directly there. The links will also be sent with the emails post this webinar. When we send out the information and the recording and stuff like that, there will be links to the scholarship program in there. All right, so apologize for all of that, but it's really important information. And now that we've gone through those types of plugs, let's get into the really fun part of the questions themselves and the Q&A. So if you haven't already, please scan the QR code. Again, log into the system, real easy to get in and start asking us some questions. So we've got several questions in here. Some of them are a little interesting for the gentleman to answer, I believe. Thought long and hard about pushing a few through, but I think it's important that we address some of the questions that are coming through. All right, so from this, let's look at the first one. Gentlemen, please clarify how AWP can work with PPI. We've always been told that by PPI that it does not work. I think we've got past that. Gentlemen, please.
Yeah, well, I think that as currently configured, that's what they're talking about. And I think there's also not complete understanding. I went back and read Iris Gibson's paper in the PPI journal. And what she said was advancing advanced work packaging. So it's not that we can't make it work, but I think we have to understand what operations science is before we can go apply it to advanced work packaging. And I think that real quick down to the number 3 is the major differences between Lean and AWP. The biggest difference is the commercial and cultural environment in which they operate. Is that AWP is usually used seems to be usually used in very transactional top-down types of contracts. And one of our slides was we have to figure out how to minimize the disruption that's causing. And so, but the idea of understanding flow is going to help anybody. So PPI those processes can help you understand how to make your packages flow, no matter what contract you're in. Fernando,
so one thing I do want to address the AWP PPI question. And yes, there's been a lot of challenges, some pressure, some publications that came out, and we have relationships with those folks at PPI, and by meeting with them and understanding what we were trying to do in AWP and what they're trying to do at PPI, we found that there was a lot of common ground. And as you can see now with our members, we actually have PPI members, in place. They've now spoken at our conferences, and we can see that there's these common grounds where AWP can benefit from the science approach, right? And we can understand, because in my mind, AWP is a lean thinking process, right? We're defining the work, we're making it ready, we're releasing it when it's ready, and then we're studying what happened when things go right or go wrong, right? So very, very lean concepts in there. Operation science has techniques in evaluating material flows, which we're very concerned about on the AWP side, very concerned about on the lean side. How do we actually measure? What are the optimal flows? What are the optimal handoffs between, batch sizing of engineering and batch sizing of materials? And there are those a lot more, but those are the easy ones. And we can apply those principles. We can apply lean principles within AWP, and gets really clear where, right? But we have to have the process and develop the how. Is really a key component of what we're trying to do.
By the way, we never said it would be easy.
Yeah.
Nobody said it's going to be easy. But I had personal conversations with the founders and directors of PPI, and they said they kind of wondered what I was doing off in the AWP world. And I said, well, you're trying to help them create flow. Yeah, well, we're in. That was kind of the deal. And so we have both Fernando and I have worked with them and really value what they're going to be able to offer to us. And let's see.
I think that's a great comment, guys. And I expedited a question up here as well, because I think based on that question, it's a question we get often because there were some shots fired across bows some time ago, and there's some strong people in the industry who like to take to certain media outlets to say certain things. But I think it was all good, in my opinion, and I thank that person for asking that question, because it gives us a chance to address it directly. And the reason why I think it's all good is because, first off, it's brought these two gentlemen together. It's sparked the joint working group, where now it ends up with a situation of, when we have controversy, we start analyzing each other as to where things don't work and why it is that people are saying there's controversy. What did we discover? Holy cow, people have gone in a little bit different directions, and we can bring this together. And I think I expedited this one question because I think everything you were saying, I completely agree with, and I'm a strong proponent for bringing all of these production systems together. And I think one of the big things is, as far as some things that we would address, is how do we tie lean to IWP production? Because when we talk about lean, we're talking about a lot of production systems. And when we talk about AWP, we're talking about the prescription of work to be done. So when we put those two together, one is helping us to be more efficient with the prescription of work. So how do we really tie lean to the production of the IWPs, guys?
Yeah. So let's just take it from a 6-week look ahead program. On the IWP production side, we typically target, hey, we'd love to release IWPs constraint free to the field, to the foreman, 4 weeks ahead of when the work's going to start, right? Because there's a lot of field coordination to happen. There's a lot of materials to be gathering, and there's a lot of readiness conditions, whether it's surveying or quality issues or whatever it might be. Prerequisite work being done have to be complete. That IWP can start when it needs to start. So a lot of what you see is that somebody drops an IWP into a 6-week look ahead, and if it's a cut and paste out of a P6 schedule, or it's just a line item in a work plan, right? That's where lean can really drive things more to drive up reliability, right? So when we drop an IWP into a look ahead plan, are we dropping in a line that says IWP is being worked on, or are we dropping in work steps? And those work steps can now be collaborated across other stakeholders, general foreman or foreman, into a last planner type environment, where they are making the trade-offs between work, making sure that prerequisite work that's being done is going to be delivered 3 weeks from now or whatever, and they get a good understanding. They make trade-offs, they make adjustments, right? Surveys, scaffolding, and all that drop into the week work plan, because that is what the strength of last planner is to get everybody to understand what they're physically going to do and what they're going to actually commit to doing, so I can reliably hand over something to you so you can start the day you wanted to start, right? And I'm giving myself that 4-week window to develop that plan. So John, you might have something to add too.
Quick thing is, the biggest thing I would do is structure your IWPs around what they're going to release somebody else to go do. The reason, that's what I call the pull conversation. I'm doing this so somebody else can do that, and here's what I need to go do that. So think about it as how you're going to make a handoff to the next crew, and exactly what does that crew need from you to go to the step. And then operations science helps you figure out when we should be doing it. Like I said, I've seen many people making very reliable promises to do work that doesn't need to be done. And so this the biggest thing is who's going to use it when you get done. And by the way, that also explains why almost all overtime on construction projects is a complete waste as far as moving the schedule forward, because no one is going to use it when you get done. Just a real quick story. We were measuring of the promised work, how many of the promised tasks was somebody else going to work on immediately after you got done, and it's usually only about 25%. So that work you got done just went into a pile waiting for somebody else. Work waiting in a pile isn't moving the job forward. Just getting the work done and into another pile doesn't help. You've got to create flow. I don't know if
Right.
that was useful or not, but that's the sort of thinking we're trying to bring in.
Yeah, and
No,
the commonality between Lean and AWP is it's all about completion, right? We've got to complete work to release work. And if we can align ourselves to that effort, then our projects will start flowing a lot better.
yeah,
A plant that's 95% done isn't worth anything because it can't produce anything yet. It can't produce till it's done.
Right.
well, and then there's the old adage that the last 10% of any production facility is equal to the first 90%.
Yeah.
When you start looking at the how that works. So I thank you guys for that explanation. I think that was great, and I think most of my students know it, but many online may not. But my first into heavy industrial construction planning was I was actually a lean construction last planner facilitator before I ever got into any of the IWP and work-phase planning and AWP type directions. So I appreciate you guys bringing that together because it is kind of coming home for me. All right, so good question on that one, whoever brought forward that. So a little housekeeping on it. I think this is a great question. Will there be a guide on how to apply, say, the 3 methodologies mentioned together and eliminate process overlap? Because I would say there is some process overlap, but more so than anything, there's complementary aspects, but there probably should be a guide on where the intersection points are, I guess.
Yeah, this is a really good question. I think we are, the AWP plus Lean Joint Working Group has been publishing these papers, and we are working with the different organizations to identify where this blend needs to happen. And the whole concept is that you as an organization have to decide on what blend and how much of any one methodology are you going to adopt in any one project. A heavy industrial project may be more heavy on AWP with some Lean. A more hospital might have some combination in the middle of both, right? Versus a transportation project versus a large versus a small. So there is I think in that flow paper we're going to start addressing it. Not so much focused on the methodologies, but on the key things that a good project should have. That will draw from ADP, will draw from Lean, will draw from DFMA and Operation Science. So, a goal would be to create a guideline on how to make decisions on what you're going to go do would be a good thing, right? But not, hey, here's the formula, because once you say this is what you're going to do, the first thing you're going to say is, well, that doesn't apply to my project. I have a whole portfolio of small projects. So the question needs to be, is how do I apply an ADP plus Lean blend, PPI blend to my situation, right? And that takes a little bit of thought, but the rewards are great. Everybody's now they want 30% improvement in capital project delivery, time, cost, money, all these things. How do you deliver it, right? So that's the question.
Let me jump in. One of the questions at the bottom, it says, do we know that Lean works for repetitive commercial vertical? Hey, almost my entire career has been on first of kind industrial projects, very, very complex industrial projects, and it works better there. It's actually more helpful on those types of projects than the hospital type projects you hear so much about. So
yeah, but in terms of Lean, though,
Lean thinking does help on those projects.
Yeah, exactly. And so what can we learn from those high repetitive projects that we can apply to industrial? We're going to say, well, we don't have repeated projects. Well, but we got 30,000 spools. So what is our standard process that we should be bringing in, and how do we get reliability on the delivery of those things? This TAC planning program, is a big interest now in how we apply it into these industrial unicorns. I love that. Project, and they absolutely do. But it is that strategic thought process that has to happen. What do I pull from? What's my toolkit look like? What am I pulling from my toolkit?
I think that's a very good question, because we get asked that a lot. I think, and I'm sure from both sides, that question comes up quite often. And I think the thing that needs to be understood is it's all about making sure that the right things are getting to the field at the right time, and that we're clearing the way for those types of production facilities. Now, the big question, I think, as part of this question is, where do we find info on making it work in industrial unicorns? I mean, to me, that's more last planner driven information. It makes sense. So where would people go, John, to get information on the last?
Well, the better place, go see. Most of you have CII. Go find the. I don't have the research team numbers up. I think it's 370 or 271, but the I2PD research team, industrial integrated project delivery. They have lots of stuff there for you. That is not LCI. I mean, this is a separate look at it, independent from LCI, although they can consult with a lot of lean leaders. So that'd be a good place to go read about it. And well, I'll tell you, if you have a project where things need to flow smoothly, lean and operations science can help you. Yeah. If you're finding yourself that problem that the last 10% is taking with disproportionate time and money, it can help you. And the story I'll tell you, the project Fernando helped me with. We took a project that they thought we couldn't do. We took 25% or more off of the peak headcount. So we reduced, on a pretty good job, we reduced peak headcount by about 250 people and pulled the end date in 2 months. So just, and this was on a plant that where a day of production is like you can buy the state of Delaware or something like that. You know,
right. So I just want to address time quickly for 1 minute, and that is that, gentlemen, are you comfortable with going an extra few minutes? And those that have to leave right now that have a hard stop, I thank you very much for joining us in our webinar series, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thank you for joining us. I think we're going to cover a couple more questions. If you guys agree to stick around for a couple more minutes, I think we got it's on the screen, and we can wrap those up pretty quick because they seem to be huddling around similar topics.
Yeah, this first one's interesting. Production physics truly be applied to bespoke projects. One thing we have to understand is, you know, it's not everything all at once, right? We have to think what are the principles of production physics that I need to be thinking about, right? And if I look at my trailer and I see a mountain of material, right? The first thing you say, wow, do I really feel good about that? All the things I need are out there somewhere, right? Or is it some manageable amount of materials that you should be looking out there that you might need for, you know, within the next 3 months? You know, what version looks good? And if you want to manage materials, AWP has a good way of doing it. Production physics has a science about doing it, right? So understanding the relationships and what you're trying to achieve, I think, is more important than looking at how do I apply production physics, which in itself, you know, there's a lot of science of that, and there's a lot of understanding, like Little's law and some other things that the PPI folks can certainly address better than I can. But the fact is, it's trying to solve a batch problem, so we are always working on the right things at the right time, right, in the right batch sizes. That's aligned with AWP thinking. That's aligned with lean thinking. So, John, I don't know if you have any thoughts about
understanding how work really flows. And what I would say, if you watch the actions of project managers, they don't understand how project work flows. They understand how to hurry. and there's a lot of times. And so that is the whole process. Sometimes the industry reminds me of an electrical utility that doesn't understand Ohm's law. There are definite physical relationships here about how things go, and that would help any project. Whether or not you apply the specific equations, the calculations, you know, at that level, but just understanding the relationships between inventory and flow and throughput would be very helpful.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, I think this question comes up a lot, and the situation with it is, let's be honest. When it comes to AWP, in AWP, we do a excellent job. I think the best job of methodologies and packaging work and putting work together that's very prescriptive as to what we're going to do in these sections of time. I don't think in AWP we do a very good job of exactly analyzing when necessarily those items should go to the field, and we count on a lot of field meetings and the intelligence of the work phase planner. A lot of that works quite well, but there is no science aspect to it. And the production and delivery of those said packages that I mentioned, I believe I don't want to say weak, because that's a strong word. Pardon the pun, weak is a strong word. But I believe that production physics and a lot of the PPI aspects, and this is why I'm so excited about the partnerships, is because I believe it fills a hole. It helps to better our production of information and our issuance of information to the field. And I think, as you said, John, I think you said it well, production physics and the understanding of it, whether you directly apply a prescript methodology versus understanding how to analyze what's going where, when, and how, I think is the biggest aspect to marrying those together. And if I could, it kind of leads us into our next direct question, which is how do we contract this? If I'm going to twist this question a little bit, how do we contract this to ensure that, you know, we've struggled with this in many other methodologies. When I was in Last Planner before, it's like, what does a contract for Last Planner look like? Since I've been in AWP, it's always a very hot topic of how do we contract it? How do we make data per script? How do we do all of those things? The fact that a contract question came up, I fully expected and makes sense that it did. I thank whoever added that one. Is there going to be contract examples, or what would you say to a BD person that's responsible for putting together a contract that wants production science and AWP melded together into a best of breed system?
Well, the first thing is you would need to package and contract the work for flow, not for contract administration. So part of the problem we have is work is packaged for how it's bought, not how it's performed. And so if you, and there's a huge part of that is that the idea of putting everything together in a bid package where you put all of these details down, lock them in months in advance, sometimes doesn't reflect the reality of the underlying process technology we're building. And so sometimes we force decisions far too early, and then they have to change. And then that change is extremely disruptive. So I sometimes, if you look at, you know, very often we talk about batch size. Batch size is a big conversation in Lean and other place. Well, these giant bid packages, to me, look like a giant batch size problem. It's way, you know, so we might look at breaking the work into smaller things and arrange it by how we're going to build it, which I know AWP addresses. I think that there's a next step in how that work is broken into fundamental scope blocks and how those can then flow more smoothly through the system with no loss of competitive pressure. I'm pretty sure, I believe pretty strongly that you don't have to give up competition to get this high degree of collaboration. In fact, you can make it
or the results. I mean, in this case, yes, absolutely, there's going to be contracts written, right? It's what is the language you got to put into it, you know, and on the Lean side, they've had IPD type contracts and collaboration language and all sorts of things embedded into it, how we're going to behave and how we're going to commit work and do work, right? And we have to look at the contracting strategy, and in the ADP world, we keep talking about contract quilts. How are all those contracts are aligned, what the roles and responsibilities are of people. There's education and awareness programs if you're an owner or an EPC even that says, hey, you're my supply chain. This is how I want to work with you in these different with these different methodologies, and why it's a win-win. So we're not getting all these problems with people doing things like that, charge 3 times for PM work, because typically your resources are there to manage this, right? There are some investments you have to make. If you're really going to try to design a new car, you don't just, you know, take the old one and just kind of throw some new
being charged 3 or 4 times now.
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah. So the fact is,
I think that's the problem. And I think that Jim's slide that there's 40% of the cost of the project is unnecessary transactions.
Yeah. How do we get rid of that and build more trust into our systems? Because the one thing I've seen a lot of time, which drives us crazy in many ways and really puts a huge burden on the projects, is that we come up with these programs, yet the PM on the side is running a parallel process because he doesn't trust it. He's driving conventional behaviors, and which conflict directly with the improved behaviors. And so people are saying, well, I work for this guy, and I'm just going to go through the motions on this better process because I'm trying to serve 2 masters, and it just doesn't work that way. So a lot of time we just don't see that buy-in that we need to drive, that's why forming these teams, these high performance teams, is a critical component. Right.
Remember back in the slide, we're trying to create better understanding to create better leaders who make better decisions.
Yeah. Right. And they'll know how to communicate to get the desired results, and not have this burden of over management. You know, who needs to be involved with this new process? What are my vendors going to do? They don't need to understand everything about everything. They just need to understand what their new process is going to be, what data exchanges they're going to be required to do, and how we're going to drive a little bit of more oversight to get what we need when we need it, to drive that reliability so we can get those overall throughput benefits.
Yeah, actually, the lean thing is, you know, easier, better, faster, cheaper, in that order. You know, we have, sometimes our projects we make it extremely difficult for people to do work on our projects. And we think it's supposed that somehow we confuse making it very, very onerous with being professional. And I think maybe we would take a different view of that. How can we make it easier for people on our projects to succeed?
Yeah,
exactly. So let's tie that to the next question. Will there be an AWP and Lean joint working group release of a report?
So we've released through the three I've shared so far. Those three have been released, and they're available. There is a fourth one that's in CII right now for editing, and that's about the flow. So we've turned that over to the CII editing group, and hopefully we'll see that one published here shortly.
We'll be speaking at the AWP event in Houston, and we'll also be speaking at the LCI event on this. So this is going to go for a while. So this has caught the attention of quite a few people that we may actually be onto something, and this notion of pulling these groups together is going to help us. Is caught a lot of.
And like John said earlier, there's no one is saying no to this, right? It's most people that once they become aware and understand what we're trying to do, it all of a sudden makes good sense, right? The challenge is, gee, how do I bring this into my organization? And we have that challenge whether you're talking about Lean, AWP, or PPI. It's the same basic question. Now I have to, I need to consider other things that might actually convince people that there is a better project delivery method that applies to our situation, right?
It's as though we have one camp saying. It's the way one camp saying ice is cold, no, water is wet, fire is hot. All these things, you don't need to be arguing. All those things are true. I think if we take a little time to understand what, because everyone's got this common goal, and the big thing is everyone wants this great culture. Okay, let's use that as our common denominator. Remove the frustration by creating flow, and I think a lot of the stuff will start emerging with leaders who know how to cultivate that.
Agreed. And I to add to that, and I certainly don't want to insult the person who put this on there at all, but I think we all look for a recipe, if you will, for how we implement these things. And we always ask the question, where's the recipe for this? Or, where's the contract examples for it in this basis? It's a good question. It's based in typical human nature to ask that question. However, and tell me if you agree with this, guys, I think the bonus to this is with these three methodologies that we're mentioning and three ways of approaching projects and we've said it many times, you've seen the slides, they're not that different. They do approach from a little bit different angles. That's why they're complementary to each other. The real benefit, I think, is that implementers, as you kind of alluded to, Fernando, need to understand the three and need to develop an internal process for an organization that includes the best of breed for this. And I think that's what you're really trying to do with these reports, right? Give a guide on how an organization can create their own internal best of breed. We've often said it in Lean, we've often said it in AWP. They're not disruptive methodologies for an organization's present way of disrupting. They're an overlay to be laid into and give prescriptive descriptions as to how we need to execute certain aspects of projects. And if we bring that all together, those that are involved in that organization's implementation should be able to easily write those contract examples, I think.
We don't want to just send you the surfboard and put you on that big wave.
Right.
You know, we need to understand how surfboards work and make sure the surfboard we get you is the right one for you, and that you start on the right size wave.
Right,
You know?
right. Or we put down a set of skis and say, you need to be an expert. Go down this double black diamond, even though it's the first time you ever skied, right? So there is a process. And one thing I do want to emphasize is that even in AWP, if you say, well, this is the standard AWP program, and we're just going to follow it, 100%, we are missing the idea or the concept that ADP is to be molded, right? So an ADP for a giga project versus the ADP framework for a portfolio project or for a different types, whether it's an industrial or a process or anything else, right? We have to look at it because a turnaround is not going to be the same thing. It's going to have the same principles, but how do we optimize in the engineering and how do we optimize in material? Who's going to deliver the IWPs? All those are framework questions that we adjust and tweak to suit our standards in our corporate standards to suit a project. Same thing with Lean, right? Hey, if you're advanced, you're going to be doing choosing by advantages. You're going to be doing all sorts of things. You're going to be doing TAC planning and all these. But when you start out, you just might be trying to get last planner on board, right? Build an effective look ahead.
Again, Lean's the way of thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not the tools.
Right.
Exactly, and I think that's where a lot of people get hung up. Having a good understanding of these methodologies to be able to integrate the philosophies from all into a single work process that's going to work best for your organization. Because as we've said earlier, it's an overlay. And the overlays are different based on what's underneath. If your organization has been lacking in certain areas, you may have certain larger workflows that you're going to have to build from certain industry best practices. And that's all we're trying to give, I believe, our listeners here is the tools to be able to analyze your internal processes, look at best of breed methodologies, bring it forward to build that best of breed for yourself. Because every organization is different. Somebody alluded to it earlier. Our projects are, what was the term, unicorns or bespoke. So, I believe that our organizations are the same way. That does not discount these methodologies. It just means you may apply them a little bit differently, and you have to examine how each one of these types of methodologies can be complementary to each other as well as your organization. And I thank you, gentlemen, for that. And I've had you over 20 minutes over now. I thank you for that. I put an end to the questions. Thank you all for asking the questions. They're coming fast and hard.
Yes.
The last one, I think, most typical question asked in these webinars, will we be sent the slides after the presentation, gentlemen?
Sure, I think a PDF of the slides is what we had in mind.
Yes, sir. So we will package the slides. The AWP University will package the slides up, both the administrative slides that I was showing that have all the QR codes on how to find everything and find everybody, as well as the presentation. It'll be a single file, little PDF that we will email out after. I believe, I may be wrong, but it'll be either one or two emails that will also have the link to be able to view the webinar. What I would leave our listeners with us that have stuck with us, there's over 2/3 of our listeners have stuck with us for the extra 20 minutes. I thank you for that. Those that have stuck with us, so that please feel free, if you liked what you heard here or you need to drive this forward, please feel free to share the links. The registration for this webinar is still open. Funny, right? We just ended it, but the registration is still open. If you go and register for the webinar, you will be given a link to be able to watch the webinar. Of course, it won't be live. You won't be able to ask questions, but you will be able to have your colleagues view this particular webinar for a certain amount of time. I believe it's 30 days we keep them active. So please feel free to share the links, the registrations. If you want to share this information, feel free. It is public domain. We do this as a service. This is not revenue generating. It is free. So please share if you like what you've heard here. I thank you all for joining us. Gentlemen, any final words for our listeners?
No, reach out to us if you'd like more information, and really encourage you to explore all these methodologies and start using your imagination as to how some of these can be applied, right?
Be curious.
It's not all in one. be curious, exactly.
Exactly. And thank you, gentlemen. There is a survey that's active now within Slido. Please feel free to go in and fill out the survey. Let us know how we did. There's a couple questions in there, future guests that you may want to see. If you've got a suggestion for some of those, maybe you'd like to see more lean and guests from PPI. I'd like to see some more of those in our next season, which will be starting in fall with the webinar series. So let us know. And let us know how we did, and if you've got suggestions for a future guest. Gentlemen, Fernando, John, I thank you. Great job. And as always, keep going. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. For more information, visit our website at ccteglobal.com.